As you found from my emails to you all and from your bulletin this morning, I'm titling this morning's message, Does Anyone Smell Smoke? It was just what we would call a good life. A steady job, a comfortable home, loving family and friends. Moses had it all. That is, once he settled down in Midian. The years go by and Moses seems content with small pleasures, small accomplishments. Moses never talks about his past or dreams about his future. He lacks any true passion, any sense of adventure. He simply lives the good life. And then there comes that wonderful day. A day that starts out like any other day. Moses gets up early. He leaves for work, out into the countryside, leading his father-in-law's sheep. Hours pass without incident. The landscape is still, except for the sound of the grazing flock. Then, in the far distance, something interrupts that tranquil scene, and Moses sees a bush blazing. For several minutes, Moses sits there and watches the flickering flames, and then he realized that the leaves on the branches on the bush are not burning. They are not discoloring with the blackening of the flame. I'm sure confused by the sight, Moses decides to investigate. He starts to walk toward that bush, and suddenly the voice in the air calls, Moses! Moses! Sound of the voice fills the empty countryside. It resounds and bounces off the hills. Then his heart responds, and he hears himself say this, Yes, here I am. The voice tells Moses, this is holy ground. Take off your sandals. And he does it. And then he drops to his knees in the dusty soil. The voice identifies himself, he said. I am your ancestors' God. The God, yes, of Abraham, yes, of Isaac and Jacob. Now Moses falls flat on the ground and puts his face in the dirt. If he wants to live, he dare not look at the face of God. Childhood memories return to him. Stories he's heard that this God intruded into his ancestors' life. He knows of this God from the old stories, but he's never encountered him. Not in a dream, not in a vision, and certainly not in daytime while out tending the flock. Moses feels that thumping in his chest getting stronger and stronger as his heart pounds. Full of emotion, the voice goes on. I have seen the misery of my people. I have heard the outcry against their taskmasters. I have come to rescue them from Pharaoh. I will bring them into a broad land, a fertile land, a land with milk and honey flowing. And you, Moses, will lead my people out of Egypt. Now, more memories begin to confront Moses. He knows Egypt. He was raised there as the adopted son of the Pharaoh's daughter who found him floating in a basket. Although an Israelite, he did not suffer with the people. He was both an Egyptian and an Israelite, and yet he really was neither. One day, the young man Moses left the safety of the palace grounds, where he was very secure. He was curious to learn what life there was outside the walls of the palace. And he walked into a world of oppression, where the Israelites, his own flesh and blood, were beaten daily and died long before their time. Filled with rage, he assaults and kills an Egyptian overseer who he found beating an Israelite, and he buried his body in the sand. But word spread quickly that Moses was a murderer. And it was the very Israelite whose life he'd saved who betrayed him. And so he was forced to run away out of Egypt into Midian. And there Moses married and began a family. Home, work, kept him busy, made him happy, and he forgot about his people, the Israelites. He no longer felt as they did, but now the God of his ancestors tells him to leave this comfortable nest and return to Egypt and deliver his people from bondage. The God of his ancestors, in fact, tells him to become a hero. Moses offers first one excuse and another. He had no voice. I'm not a public speaker. Moses had all of our excuses. But none of the excuses for you or me ever worked before God. The voice from the blazing bush calls out. Now, Moses is a murderer. How can he return? They'll kill him. But God knows all things, says, I will protect you. I will be with you. You are mine. Go free the Israelites, because they will worship one day on this very spot. God's awesome, earth-shattering name. He now knows. I am that I am. God's name, the Lord of every age, past and future. And as God, the same God we meet even now, here and today. But here the story ends in the reading. But not the story of Moses, and not your story of mine in this very time. You see, Moses accepts God's call to him because no longer will be Moses the center of his own life, the center of his ego, the center of his own satisfaction. Instead, God has called him, as us, to be concerned for the people of God, who God wills to be in our life in this world. No longer will Moses' life, or yours or mine, be safe and secure and devoid of growth. He will give himself up to a life of faith and receive a great reward. You see, yes, Moses must bear the people's grumbling of their addiction to slavery, their readiness to flee the freedom that God was willing to give them, to return to the freedom, the lack of freedom, because they didn't like their desert wandering. All of this makes Moses stressed, and his hair grows yellow and gold and long before its time. Yet, this is not the end. Moses was God's friend and confidant to the very end. How does this affect us today? I want you and all of us to remember that bushes didn't blaze just for Moses. Bushes blaze for us. And when that bush blazes for us, we must respond. Must turn from our preoccupations and discover what waits for each and every one of us. Perhaps it's some terrible burden that makes us investigate the blazing bushes in hope of a better life. Perhaps it's some sense of wonder that leads us there, to the bush, our desire for a eternity. Any case, we must turn aside and draw near if we are to hear the bush call to us and set us this day on our way. Tell me, what are the blazing bushes in your life? A blazing bush when some person or some place or moment reaches out to us and calls insistently our name. A blazing bush when your life's glory and pain and challenges and patience and laughter and grief together speak to you in a voice that could only come from heaven. A bush blazes when something demands that we set aside our mask and when we live from the center of our deepness in our soul. A bush blazes when you and I take an action, when we can help one another. Some bushes blaze forth in every life, but you must dare to look at them. They are all around us this morning, sitting with you in this church. People in need of your seeing them for who they are, in need of burning bush in your life. Does anyone smell smoke? A man noticed that there was a little girl sitting by herself in a park. Everyone passed her by and never stopped to see why she was looking so sad. Dressed in a worn pink dress, barefooted and dirty, the girl just sat and watched the people go by. She never tried to speak. She never said a word, and many people passed her by, and no one would stop. The next day, the man decided to go back to the park in curiosity and see if the little girl was still sitting there. And yes, there she was, right in the very same spot. There she was as yesterday, and still with the same sad look, the same dirty pink dress, not looking up. But today he was going to make his own move. He walked over to the little girl, for all of us know that the park is full of strange people, no place for a little girl to sit alone. And as he got closer, he could see the back of her little dress. What grotesque shape! He figured that was the reason that most people passed her by and made no effort to speak to her. Deformities are a low blow for our society, and heaven forbid if you make a step toward to assist someone who is different. As he got closer, the little girl lowered her eyes slightly to avoid his intense stare. As he approached, he could not see anything but this grotesque back shape. He smiled to let her know that it was okay, that he was there to help and to talk. And he sat down beside her and opened with a smile. "Hello." Little girl acted shocked and stammered a hi back after a long stare into his eyes. Oh, he couldn't take his eyes off her back, that grotesque shape. But he smiled shyly, and she smiled back. They talked until darkness fell and the park was completely empty. He asked the little girl why she was so sad, and the little girl looked at him and said, "Because I'm different." He immediately said, "That you are," and he smiled. The little girl acted even sadder and said, "I know." "Little girl," he said, "you remind me of an angel, sweet and oh so innocent." And she looked at him and smiled. And then slowly she got to her feet and said, "Really? Yes, you look like a guardian angel sent to watch over the people who walk by you every day." And she nodded her head and smiled even more broadly. With that, she reached around and opened the back of her dirty pink dress and allowed wings to spread. Then she said, "I am. I'm your guardian angel." And with a twinkle in her eye, He was speechless. Surely he was seeing things. She said, "Sir, for once you thought of someone else other than yourself. And therefore, sir, my job is through." He got to his feet and said, "Wait, why did not anyone else in the park stop to help an angel?" And she looked at him and smiled and said, "You're the only one, sir, that could see me." And she was gone. See, if your life, you have many burning bushes, people who you were too busy or too self-centered to deal with, but mind you, that they will come again in a different fashion, in a different way, in a different disguise, but they will still be burning for your love. Don't pass them by again. You may just miss your appointment